Most men have been taught the wrong thing their entire lives. They've been told to be smoother, more clever, more charming. They've been handed lines, scripts, tricks, told that if they just say the right thing, she'll be drawn in like a moth to a flame. And most men believe it. They memorize those lines. They practice those techniques. And then they wonder why, after every interaction, something feels hollow, off, wrong, why she pulls away, why she loses interest, why the connection dissolves the moment it starts to form. What if I told you the entire premise is broken? What if I told you that there isn't a trick, but there is a truth? A truth. So psychologically grounded, so counterintuitive, that the moment you truly understand it, you'll look back at every interaction you've ever had with a woman and see it differently. Today, I'm going to walk you through 7 psychological principles that govern genuine, powerful attraction. And I need you to stay with me all the way to the end, because number 7 is the one most men never figure out. It's quiet, it's subtle, and it might be the most important thing you hear today. Here's the problem with everything you've been sold. The entire world of attraction advice is built on a fundamental misunderstanding of what attraction actually is. Most people treat it like a sales transaction, like you're trying to convince someone to buy something they don't want. So they give you techniques, tactics, lines to say, moves to make, but attraction isn't a transaction. It's a response. It's an involuntary, deeply emotional, psychologically complex response that a person has to the energy and presence of another human being. You cannot hack it, you cannot trick it, and you absolutely cannot sustain it through performance. What you can do is understand the conditions under which it naturally arises and become a man who embodies those conditions, not just in what he says, but in who he is. That's the shift most men never make. They stay at the level of behavior, tweaking their words, their timing, their delivery, while the internal architecture remains unchanged. The men who understand this, they don't need scripts. They don't need tricks. Women are drawn to them because of something real, something you can feel the moment they walk into a room. That's what today is about, not a magic phrase, a deeper understanding. And if you're ready to actually internalize this, to stop performing and start being, then let's go. But before we dive in, if you're new here and this kind of deep dive psychological content is what you've been looking for, hit subscribe right now. This channel exists for the men who want real answers, not surface level tricks. Drop a like if you're already feeling where this is going. And tell me in the comments, where in the world are you watching this from? I read every single one. Now, let's get into it. 7 principles, each one building on the last, each one more powerful than the one before it. And remember, we're not talking about things to say, we're talking about things to embody. The words are just the surface. What lives beneath the words is everything. Number 1, the power of specificity. Stop complimenting her and start seeing her. Let me paint you a picture. A woman is talking to 2 different men at a party. The first man tells her she's beautiful. He tells her she has a great smile. He tells her she seems really fun. She nods, smiles politely, and drifts toward the snack table. The second man listens to her talk about her job for 3 minutes. Then he says, the way you just described, that the frustration underneath the excitement, there's actually a really rare combination. Most people settle into one or the other. She stops. She looks at him differently. What just happened? The first man saw an attractive woman. The second man saw her, specifically, perceptively, as an individual. Here's the psychology. Humans have a deep primal need to be witnessed, not admired in a general sense, witnessed, seen for who they actually are, not just what they look like or what they project. Generic compliments, however well-intentioned, are essentially noise. They blend into every other compliment she's ever received. They require nothing of you. They reveal nothing about her. Specific observations are different. Specific observations say, I was actually paying attention. I saw something in you that isn't immediately obvious. I bothered to look. That's compelling. That's disarming. That creates a kind of intimacy that no pickup line ever could. The shift. Stop thinking about what to say to impress her. Start thinking about what you've actually noticed about her. What's specific, what's distinct, what's real. And here's where it gets deeper, because once you understand the power of genuine observation, you start to realize that everything you've been doing before was built on the wrong foundation entirely, which leads us directly to number 2. Number 2, stillness as a signal. What your nervous system is saying before you open your mouth. Before you say a single word to a woman, she's already reading you. Not consciously, not analytically, but her nervous system is doing something extraordinary. It's scanning yours. This isn't mysticism, this is neuroscience. The human brain contains what researchers call mirror neurons, neural circuits that literally mirror the emotional state of the people around us. It's why you feel anxious when someone anxious walks into a room. It's why a calm, settled presence can make an entire group relax without saying a word. Now think about what most men communicate before they speak. Tight shoulders, rapid speech, eyes that dart around the room looking for validation, a laugh that comes too quickly, a need to fill every silence with more words. These are not character flaws. They are signals of an unregulated nervous system, of a man who is performing rather than being, and her nervous system reads all of it, instantly, unconsciously, long before your first sentence lands. The man who walks into a room and is still not passive, not disengaged, but genuinely settled within himself, communicates something entirely different. He communicates safety, groundedness, the absence of desperation. He communicates that he doesn't need this interaction to go a certain way in order to feel okay about himself. That quality, the internal regulation, is extraordinarily rare, and it is extraordinarily attractive. The practice is not a trick. It is genuine inner work. Breathe before you speak. Let silence be comfortable rather than something to be filled. Stop moving faster than you think. Stop speaking faster than you feel. Stillness is not passivity. It is the outward expression of a man who has nothing to prove. And when a woman encounters a man who has nothing to prove, she becomes curious. Because most men are trying desperately to prove everything, which is exactly what number 3 is about. Number 3, the revelation principle. Why vulnerability done right is the most powerful thing in the room. Here is something that terrifies most men. Being known, not admired, not approved of, known, with all the complexity and contradiction and uncertainty that comes with being a real human being. Most men spend enormous amounts of energy managing their image, projecting strength, hiding doubt, performing confidence. They keep women at arm's length, not out of cruelty, but out of fear. Fear that if she really saw them, if the curtain fell and the whole performance stopped, she'd leave. And ironically, this is exactly what destroys attraction. Here's the psychological mechanism. Human beings are drawn to authenticity, the way we're drawn to warmth. It's a deep evolutionary pull. When someone is genuine, when they let something real slip through it, activates something in the listener. Trust, interest, connection. Brené Brown's research at the University of Houston spent decades documenting this. Vulnerability, not weakness, not neediness, but honest, appropriate self-disclosure is one of the most powerful drivers of interpersonal connection we know of. The key word is appropriate. This is not about confessing your fears on the first date or performing emotional openness like it's a strategy. That is still performance. That is vulnerability weaponized rather than expressed. Real vulnerability is quieter. It's saying, I don't know, when you don't know. It's sharing an honest opinion even when it's unpopular. It's admitting that something matters to you without hedging it to death. It's being genuinely moved by something without immediately retreating behind irony. When a man can do this, when he can let something real be present in his words without anxiety, she feels it. She responds to it, not because it's a technique, but because it's true. And truth, in a world full of performance, is magnetic. But there's a shadow side to this principle that almost nobody talks about. A line that once crossed transforms a magnetic quality into its opposite. We'll get there. First, number 4. Number 4, the frame principle. Whoever holds the frame holds the attention. Every interaction has a frame. A frame is the invisible structure of meaning underneath the conversation. It determines who is evaluating whom. It determines the emotional weight of what's said. It shapes how both people feel about the interaction, not just during it, but after. Most men, without realizing it, walk into every interaction with women in an evaluative frame that places her above him. She is the judge, he is the applicant. His words are responses to an unspoken test. His behavior is calibrated to what he thinks she wants to see. This is the architecture of anxiety, and she can feel it. It communicates something she may never consciously articulate, but always feels on an instinctive level. He needs my approval to feel good about himself. And there is almost nothing less attractive than that. Here is the shift. Not arrogance, not dismissiveness, not artificial aloofness. Those are overcorrections, equally unattractive, equally ungrounded. The real shift is this: become genuinely curious about her as a person, rather than anxious about whether she likes you as a man. Let you be the one with curiosity and standards. Let the frame be, I am genuinely interested in who you are. I am also clear about who I am, and I'm not looking for your approval. I'm looking for a real conversation. That frame communicates equality, self-respect, genuine interest without dependency. It's subtle, but it changes everything: the quality of your attention, the ease of your words, the absence of neediness. She feels it as a kind of effortlessness. She interprets it as confidence, though it's actually something deeper. It's a man who is fully at home in himself. And that brings us to something harder to define, the principle that sits at the heart of every genuinely attractive interaction, something that almost defies explanation until you see it clearly. Number 5, the paradox of pursuit. Why chasing her pushes her away? There is a painful paradox at the center of how most men pursue connection. The harder they try, the less it works. Not because the universe is cruel, not because women are playing games, but because of a very specific psychological phenomenon called reactance, the human tendency to resist when we feel our autonomy is being constrained. When a man pursues too intensely, too quickly, too urgently, with too much emotional investment too early, something shifts in the dynamic. It stops feeling like two people exploring genuine connection and starts feeling like pressure, like expectation, like there's something she owes him in return for his interest. And the moment she feels that pressure consciously or not, her instinct is to pull back. This is not rejection. This is biology. Now here's where it becomes profoundly counterintuitive. The man who holds his interest lightly, who is genuinely interested but not desperate, who can take or leave the outcome without existential dread, that man is almost impossible to look away from. Why? Because he communicates something about himself that is extraordinarily rare. He communicates sufficiency. He has a life, a direction, a sense of self that exists completely independent of whether this particular woman is interested in him. He is not trying to fill a void with her presence. He is inviting her into something that is already full. The shift here is internal, not tactical. It's not about pretending you don't care. It's about genuinely building a life that is rich enough, purposeful enough, interesting enough that a romantic connection is a beautiful addition rather than a desperate necessity. When you arrive in that place, something changes in how you carry yourself. Something changes in how you speak, and she will feel the difference before you've said anything at all. But there's one more thing, one principle beneath all of these, the deepest layer of what makes any of this real or hollow. And as we approach the final principles, the stakes become considerably higher. Number 6, the language of genuine interest questions that open doors instead of closing them. Most men think they are asking questions. They're not. What most men are doing in conversation is using the form of a question while actually telegraphing what they want the answer to be. They're performing curiosity without experiencing it. You seem really adventurous. Are you the spontaneous type? Flattery disguised as a question. Have you ever been with someone who really understood you? Subtle presupposition that he's that person. These aren't questions, they're moves, and she knows the difference. Maybe not consciously, but somewhere in her nervous system, the distinction lands. Real questions come from a genuine desire to know. They are open-ended. They follow the thread of what she actually said rather than steering toward a predetermined destination. They say, I am actually curious about you. Your answer might surprise me. I am genuinely listening. Here's one practical example. The difference between asking, do you love your job, and asking, what's the part of your work that makes the rest of it worth it? Those two questions come from entirely different places. The first requires a yes or no. The second assumes complexity. It treats her as someone with nuance, with inner conflict, with a real interior life. Most people are never asked about their interior life. When someone actually asks with genuine curiosity, with zero agenda, the effect is startling. It creates what psychologists call felt sense of mattering. She doesn't just feel liked, she feels known, she feels interesting. And here is the profound truth. The person who makes you feel interesting is almost always the person you want to keep talking to. This is not a trick. This is the genuine practice of curiosity. And it requires you to actually be interested, not in getting something from her, but in knowing something about her. That distinction is everything, and it sets up the final section perfectly, because everything we've discussed so far is the preparation, the setup, the foundation, and number 7 is the roof, the piece that holds the whole thing together. The one most men never figure out, the one that without it, everything else eventually falls apart. Number 7, the final, most important principle, integrity of self, the thing she's actually testing without knowing it. You want to know the real secret? Not a line, not a tactic, not a perfect question, or a moment of calibrated vulnerability, or a perfectly still nervous system. The real secret is this: she needs to know that you are the same person when the stakes change. Let me explain. Every interaction with a new person involves a kind of invisible audition, not of your looks, not of your bank account, not even of how funny or smart you are. It's an audition of your consistency, your integrity, your sense of self under pressure, because here is what women have learned through lived experience in a way that is largely invisible but absolutely visceral. Men perform, men show up as their best version in the beginning. They are patient, curious, engaged, present. They listen, they ask good questions, they hold back nothing, and then slowly or suddenly the performance ends. The neediness emerges, the real temperament shows up, the mask slips. She has learned to watch for the early signals of that eventual reveal, and she finds them not in the exceptional moments, the big gestures, the impressive statements, but in the small ones. The moments when he disagrees with her, the moments when she challenges him on something, the moments when the conversation goes somewhere uncomfortable. Does he collapse? Does he become defensive? Does he suddenly become who he thinks she wants him to be? Does he make himself smaller to avoid conflict? Does he get quietly controlling? Or does he stay himself, warm but real, interested but grounded, willing to disagree with respect, willing to be uncertain without anxiety, consistent in his values regardless of what the moment demands? That quality, integrity of self is what she is actually reading for, and she is reading for it long before she can articulate it. It's the feeling she has when she leaves the conversation, not he said all the right things, something quieter, deeper, harder to name. He was real, and real, in a world of performance, is the rarest thing there is. This is why every technique eventually fails without this foundation. You can have perfect delivery on a clever observation. You can ask an extraordinary question. You can hold still while every other man in the room fidgets. But if beneath all of it, you don't actually know who you are, if your behavior is still ultimately calibrated to her reaction rather than rooted in your own values, she will feel it eventually. Maybe not on day 1, maybe not in the first week, but eventually the structure will show, and when it does, the thing you built will lose its weight. The deepest work, the work that makes everything else sustainable, is knowing yourself, your values, your boundaries, what you will and won't negotiate, what you care about genuinely, what you think is actually true, what you believe in enough to say out loud, even when it's unpopular. That man, the man who is genuinely, consistently, authentically himself, does not need lines. He does not need scripts. He does not need psychological tricks. He only needs to show up, and her entire nervous system will recognize it. Let me zoom out for a moment, because I want to be clear about what today was and what it wasn't. This was not a playbook for manipulation. It was not a formula for getting what you want from women by performing a more sophisticated version of the same old performance. What we've covered today is the architecture of genuine human connection, the psychological conditions under which real attraction, real interest, real curiosity between two people can actually grow. Specificity over flattery, stillness over anxiety, vulnerability over performance, holding a frame of equality rather than constantly seeking approval, releasing the outcome without releasing your interest, asking real questions, being who you actually are even when the stakes rise. None of this is a trick, all of it is a practice. It requires consistency, self-awareness, and honest reflection about the gap between who you are and who you're performing. And here's what I want you to hold. Not every woman you meet will respond to this. Not every connection is meant to deepen. Not every dynamic will unfold into something real. And that's not a failure, that's discernment. That's two people discovering whether or not this particular combination of two particular personalities has something worth building. Observation isn't paranoia. Self-awareness isn't obsession. The goal is not to diagnose every interaction or catastrophize every moment of disconnection. The goal is clarity. The goal is to show up as yourself fully, consistently, without the performance, and to find the connections that respond to who you actually are, rather than the ones that were always responding to who you were pretending to be. That is what real attraction looks like, not a spark manufactured by a clever line, a slow, quiet recognition between two people that something here is actual. Now, here's what I want you to do. Not tomorrow, not next week, today. Think about the last time you were in a conversation with a woman, with anyone, and you caught yourself performing, saying something you thought they wanted to hear rather than what you actually thought, hiding an opinion to avoid friction, laughing at something that wasn't funny because the room expected you to. We all do it. It's not a character flaw, it's conditioning. But awareness is the beginning of change. What would it feel like to spend one full day operating purely from your actual perspective? To say what you actually think, to ask what you're actually curious about, to disagree with respect rather than pretend to agree out of anxiety, to let someone's response to the real you be data rather than something you need to manage and control. That challenge is not small, but it is the most important one, because the version of you that shows up fully, that exists without apology and without performance, that is the version of you that the right people will be drawn to with no effort on your part. You cannot manufacture that. You can only uncover it. Start today. If this hit different, if something in what I said today landed in a way that the usual advice never quite has, then subscribe to this channel, because this is what we do here. Deep, honest, psychologically grounded exploration of what it means to show up as a real human being in real relationships. Hit the like button. It genuinely helps more people find this content. And more importantly, it tells me that this kind of depth is what you're looking for. And leave me a comment. Tell me what was the moment in today's video that changed something for you. Was it the frame principle, the integrity piece at the end, something else entirely? I read every single one, and your answers shape what I make next. And wherever you're going after this, carry yourself like a man who has nothing to prove and everything to offer. That's not arrogance, that's self-respect, and it changes everything.